Hey man,
Hey, what's going on?
we we are live. Sweet.
Exciting.
All right. So welcome everyone. It's 12 o'clock, and um, time for us to get going here. Um, so today I am joined by a very special guest and my business partner, John Dzurik. Uh, Hi, John.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Um, And I am Stephen Rockwell, the founder of HumanServices.ai. And today we have a really packed agenda. We've got a lot of stuff going on right now. Um, the first thing we're going to do today is cover, as best as we can in a very short period of time, all of the news and announcements that came out this week around AI. And it was a huge week. It seems like every week is big. This week in particular is really big. And so, so we're going to try and cover off and make sense of those. We do this every time we come in, but this one's big. This one's bigger. And then we're going to get into the topic for the day, which is prompting, prompt chaining, context chaining. We're going to get in and give you a sneak preview of what John and I have been working on for some time now, and we're really excited to cover off on the topic in ways that will give you a little bit of a sneak preview. So um, that's our agenda for today, and um, we're gonna just jump right into it. And here we go. Oh, no, I'm gonna do this one maybe. So first, let me cover off on some social impact AI news. One is that GitLab Foundation has funded its next cohort, and we're all presenting come Monday, and we're going to be at the OpenAI offices doing so. OpenAI is one of the sponsors of this, and there's a link here. I'll put it in the chat in a minute. That gets you. If you can't be there live, gets you in virtually. Uh, we've been supporting in the cohort. We've been supporting Student Basic Needs Coalition, and we've been partnering with Social Finance on an AI learning and innovation hub. And so we're really excited to show some of that. In fact, you'll maybe get some sense of where the partnership with Social Finance is going through some of today's discussion. The other piece to note is that we've that the Public Benefit Innovation Fund, which has some focus on AI, due dates coming up. I know lots of folks are figuring out how their what their proposals are going to be for that, who they're partnering with. Really excited to see that space. If we can be helpful to you at all, let us know. All right. The big news this week, which just dropped yesterday, is ChatGPT's 5.0 model. And in fact, on the consumer side, they've wiped out any other any other model. It was a pretty big step. Um, John, what are you looking for in this 5.0 model? What should we expect as we start using it? Give us any insights you might have about 5.0.
Well, yeah, I think 5.0 is. I mean, it's tested really well on the the AGI type of tests. And I think one of the things I've been using it for the past couple days or past day or so in development, and it does a really good job of succinctly understanding problems and creating ways to solve those problems. So it's a little different in that instead of being very straightforward, it does a little bit more thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. We can still get access to some of the other models in the API, but we're not going to get them um, in the front end apparently, and that's a pretty big and interesting step um, for 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 OpenAI. In the past, they've kept some of the models around, and so that's not happening. So um, on the next one of these is that like OpenAI made other news and they introduced or published open weight models. They have not done this since GPT 2 in 2019. We're seeing uh, PTOSS 120 billion parameter and a 20 billion parameter. Could you give us, John, an insight about the significance of these open weight models and sort of what do we think we're gonna use these for?
Well, I mean, I think in the open weight models get used in various other training areas. So they other groups have a tendency to stand on top of other models, and this being a one of those watershed moments where they've improved the model so drastically compared to 3 and 3.5 and things like that. This being a much better model, higher platform for other people to stand off on, but also the ability to run locally is gives you a power within the computer that allows you to say keep data secure, keeping it within your self-contained box and environment creates an environment that you wouldn't otherwise be able to have with that power.
Yeah. Um, and I'm imagining that they're available on Hugging Face now, and I'm imagining for those that have expressed interest in open source AI that this is a pretty big step for some of those advocates.
And if you have the power on your machine, you can actually go download Olama and tell it to use the OSS model. And I would suggest the 20 billion the 20 billion parameter one is a little more. It's going to run a little bit better than the larger one, but you can go run it now on your machine.
Yeah, and for those, a lot of nonprofits, even in the last week that I've been advising, have expressed this concern about PII and their either their donor data or their client data, submitting that data into a system, even with all of the sort of security assurances that a company like OpenAI is making for paid accounts. There's still some concern. People see things um, like the conversations that were released that seem like more like therapy conversations that were accessible over Google, and it just gives folks some pause. And for those that have the sort of know-how or resources, um, putting these open models behind your firewall or within your network or on your system, as John just mentioned, may be a safer or more secure bet for you. Certainly takes a little bit more work, but we're really excited to see this. That is not the only news, though. Although it seems like the biggest news was 5.0. Opus 4.1 came out, and from what I could see, just made some significant but incremental improvements in what Claude can do in terms of coding. And I know, John, you and others that I've spoken to are using Claude quite a bit for those purposes. And it looked like there was some better um, agent workings with 4.1. Seems like a step improvement. John, is there anything more on that you would want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think well, I think 4.1 is in an effort to keep up with the the five and have a clearer understanding and analysis when it does its analysis. It's a little bit clearer. A lot of what we're going to be showing later was developed on Claude 4, right? So a lot of the pieces of what we've built on was for. But ultimately, being in the environment that we are, the that ability to switch is almost a requirement anymore. Because we need to know what are the differences in the models, which ones are going to work the best.
Yeah, right. And if you go to their site, they did some benchmarking. Um, that with each one of these releases, we're seeing benchmarks, and uh, this moment is as bad as it's ever going to be, and it's pretty darn impressive. 5.0 is not AGI yet, but I think OpenAI has expressed that it's an important step along the way. We can discuss the ramifications of AGI at some other point. We're really much more into sort of the practical pieces of this. Uh, One other development, or two other developments this week, are really more multimodal. And I think, in addition to agents this year, multimodal is going to be the place where there's a lot of interest, investment, and where I think social impact organizations should be spending more time, because of the ability to create much more compelling user experiences than the sort of the text-based chatbot, right? We covered off a little bit on that last time. We'll continue to come back to that. I've got a blog coming on Monday that shares a little bit more about how I built a multimodal experience. So look out for that. Google announced on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, their next generation of being able to, from a prompt, create a navigable world, a virtual world, and uh, being able to take actions within that world. That has it. I encourage you to check it out. It's pretty darn impressive. And the other multimodal announcement was from a startup called 11 Labs. They, from a prompt now, they have a tool that allows you to create music that is sort of copyright free. It's not referencing other materials out there in a way that is going to get you caught up in that, and is is essentially creating songs from prompts. I started to play around a little bit with it. It's pretty impressive stuff, and I think when I've done the trainings, the voice and the audio and the visual pieces really hit home with nonprofit staff. And I would encourage nonprofit staff to then turn that excitement or turn that wow moment back around for your clients, and think about what kind of experiences we can create for our clients using multimodal AI.
Yeah, and I've seen some prompts out there for the VO3 for the video generation, and then I think it's if you can get it to create the video and then put the right music to it. I mean, it adds the gravitas. Just a video with no audio is one thing, but video with the right music, I mean, it becomes emotional and it becomes gripping. And I think that's the difference with the things that are going to happen along the way is, music is, it's always just been one of those things where brought people together, and it's one of those things we collaborate over, and I think it's going to change how music is driven. But I think we have to figure out a way to do that in a way that we don't lose the artists in
Yeah,
that process. And I think that's the fun part. How do we share and collaborate and still be artists?
that's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think none of us are going to be untouched, right, by this AI revolution that we're in the midst of. And as the capabilities develop, what is, how do we maintain the our humanness in this, and our creativity, are important conversations to have and to maintain. Um, my poetry might not be as elegant as ChatGPT's, but it's
It's
my
real.
own. It's real. It's my own creation. It's coming from my own feelings, and so those kinds of experiences are things we want to continue to uphold, even as these tools are coming in and maybe can do more and more of some of that for us.
I think, yeah, we don't want to lose the human connection in anything we do. And I
Yeah,
think, these are tools. This is the tools that should help foster our creativity and not constrain it.
that's right. That's right. So I'm going to. Those are some of the big announcements for the week, as we promised. If there's questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will do our best to answer those. Some of the stuff is so new, as you heard. Like, everyone's just trying to make sense of it, use it right now, and figure it out. And so that's a big part of why we're doing this series, is to make sense of what's happening, and then really try and figure out what's the social impact, dimensions, use cases for this technology. So these kind of updates, and then playing with the updates, are really important. So um, the next thing we're going to do is actually slide into the topic of the day. We're going to cover off on some work that John and I have been doing, just to sort of tee this up a little bit. Um, there's a couple different sort of places where the ideation came from. Uh, John has been really brilliant about um, thinking about the industry and sort of what's needed. And so some of these tools we think we can apply really broadly to any individual or any organization that you're going to see. We also were, like I said, partnering with social finance on uh, a government AI learning and innovation hub. And really, when I wrote those grants to GitLab and others, with Amber Ivy on that team and others, we were really thinking about sandboxing. And there's been a lot of talk about sandboxing in and wanting to test models, wanting to test AI tools. There's been a lot of talk about sandboxing in those government contexts, a little bit less so in nonprofit contexts. In fact, the EU AI law requires state government, the governments in the EU, to have sandboxing environments stood up by March of 2026, and the processes therein. So there's actually a requirement in the EU law that around these sandboxes, and they're sort of built off the regulatory sandbox idea. And so we've had this idea. It really goes back to when we were at Benefits Data Trust and Trooper Sanders, brainstorming together, saying, okay, the field needs a testing place, a safe place, to figure out what works and importantly, what doesn't work. As we got into the actual work, though, of building a sandbox and trying to make sense and starting to talk with both municipal or city agencies and some state agencies, what became clear really quickly is that the first order problem is that folks need to be able to build something for their business case or for their use case. And often that meant a some type of workflow. Step one, step two, step three that the agencies needed. And it just so happens that in the last 6 months, agents have come onto the scene, a new wave of intelligent automation, new tools. And so we've adjusted even our thinking about what we're providing just over the last few months as those agentic tools have come onto the market. So we're really able to, um, I think, to drive some AI solutioning and then tests. And so we're going to see some of this today. Um, uh, Let me give me one moment because looks like John's going to drive, um, and will seems to work. Let me. Yeah, that seems to work. I guess I'm going to put us down here. Maybe there we go. Um, and John's gonna go over just a few of these pieces that we've built out in what we're calling iBlueprint.ai. It's going to have a couple of different flavors for both government and for nonprofits and maybe some others. But here's some of the core stuff that we're doing. And so, John, why don't you show us around a little bit?
Yeah, and and thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it. I think a lot of this was the idea of leaning into humans, working together to create prompts, share prompts, and share the benefits that we're getting from things, in that hub fashion, saying, hey, can we share, for governments or for nonprofits, can we share prompts that we other people are using and are useful. So we created iBlueprint, and with that, it has a dashboard that kind of gives the prompts that you've created. It's a little look for yourself, but they all kind of are based off of AI providers, right? So, and here's kind of where a lot of the stuff that we've just we're talking about earlier in the conversation comes in that you've got to create an AI provider. Whether it's Anthropic or OpenAI or something local or something that you've spun up in your local environments to be available to your customers. You've got to be able to adapt, right? So you've got to be able to say, I can pull in any number of these different types of providers. And so what we've done is, what I've done a little earlier today, I added an open API GPT-5 Nano, just to create something that allows us to demo off of. And so, for example, one of the things that you would be able to do is write a prompt, and then in that prompt you can put these little squiggly lines around something, which makes it have a variable, so you can put a bunch of things around a topic, as in, you know, let's go with golf, right? And then what you do is you instead of just chatting with it, instead of let's try a different one. See if this one comes up with any better information. No, it's okay. Let's go back and go back to the other ones. So anyway, what it's supposed to do is actually return the information. So this one, it was not on the template side, but it what it does is it all it asked was give me 6 categories for nonprofit tools, right? And now just being a prompt that gives that information. What it does is it gives you different tool ideas: donor management, grant management, volunteer management, and things like that. And what we can do is we can create. You can run it against ChatGPT 5. You can run it against your local version. And ultimately, if somebody wants to write a fairly large prompt and to add in those templates, you can add to them as well. But that speaks to some of the power of this, in which
John,
we
can I stop you just for a second before you get to that?
sure.
So like there's just like one or two things I wanted to stress with that. One is the notion of this prompt library. And John's going to get in and show you what we call blueprint in a second, but this creates like starting points for folks. We've heard a lot around AI and productivity, and at the same time, there's been a lot of disappointment around productivity. And so, publishing a library with validated prompts that actually drive productivity, meet your particular use case, we think is really useful. We also think it's useful, like the in if you the in a collaborative way as well. So, for example, if you've got someone on your marketing team who has developed a whole set of like really solid prompts to do the work of your organization in regards to communications, and that person leaves, what happens to all that knowledge? Where does it go? Right? It actually leaves with them. There really isn't a way to drive that kind of collaboration within an organization or within the enterprise, right? And so we envision ultimately being able to create not only your a public library, but your own library and your own organization's library. This also has impacts around coalitions, people doing partnerships, people doing work together. That if someone else has figured something out, uh, let's say around some of the hybrid advising work, recreate some of that. Why not the field are doing? And in fact, why not work together, right? Be increasingly more effective. So I want to give you that frame because what John's going to show you in a second is actually the more sophisticated way of AI building. And so you're going to see even more value from being able to put different prompts together and actually build workflows that, again, just to say, are independent of any particular LLM. And so the testing part of this is you can maintain your own library or maintain your own library of blueprints and prompts independent of any particular LLM. And in fact, you'll be able to see here, you could um, run in the workflow, run different LLMs. And so part of the sandboxing that we're doing as part of the testing is actually being able to use and test how is this prompt or how is this chain going to run against different LLMs that are out there. And John's showing you there just sort of being able to select between a few that we've put into the system to date. John, you want to cover off on this really interesting workflow builder?
Yeah. So I mean, I think one of the things that it seemed interesting to me was that one prompt might lead to another prompt, lead to another prompt, and something that's called prompt chaining. But so it's the idea that one idea and one piece of set of information given to another piece of information. So what you can start with is, they give me the 8 categories for the nonprofit tools. And then, from the previous prompt, take those categories and give me outreach emails for each category that can help with those categories. And it gives you, it says, okay, give a fake name and company. You can obviously change it to be your company and your name and whatever and the goal is to be able to make these prompts and these blueprints, you know, shareable and what's called, where you can fork the information. You can kind of make it your own, right? And inject your own data and inject your own information that you and that the way that you want it to run. So then ultimately you can from the email, and this doesn't actually send the email right now, but ultimately if you have an MCP server that is centered around email and things like that, it's very much could be something that's integrated into it, but ultimately you'd want right now, and for testing purposes, we don't actually have it sending out emails. But let me run the visualizer that happens to kind of show. So right now, what it did is it went out to iBlueprint, or went out to ChatGPT 5, and it said, give me 8 categories for nonprofits, and then it took these 8 categories, and then it handed those 8 categories off to this, and it takes the information from the previous output and then creates additional information, and then and then takes the other information and passes it along. So it actually goes out and creates the prompts that's specific to these specific things. If I said, instead of 8 categories for nonprofit tools, and I changed it to 8 categories for government tools, it would restructure the whole thing and give me 8 categories for those, pass it to the prompt, and then give me the prompt back and information with around each one of the fundraising tool. Instead of the fundraising tools, it would give me information around the the government tools and so on. And so what happens is it goes and it passes the data from this to this to this, but this isn't the only thing that's available. What we can do is we can create things like memory, right? So
John, hold on 1 second, just to because I think the first time people interact with this or see this interface, it can be there can be a lot going on. So I just want to make sure I understood, and I want to repeat back. You are essentially taking 3 prompts that you've built in sort of the prompt library part of this. You've put them in and you staged them step by step. And I think what I heard you say is that the data or the output from step 1 gets handed off for input into the second stage for that prompt to run, and then you're taking that all the way through to its end. Is that correct?
that is correct, Stephen. It will take the categories, and again, if you change these categories and you make it something different, if you make it government, or you make it, it could be about banking, and it could be whatever you're trying to promote, from a social media. aspect. It can be, the a bunch of different things, but the goal is to be able to get it to get your seed data to go generate. Use AI in a way that you may not have thought before. The
Hmm.
goal is because right now a lot of what we do is go, oh, I've got some information, that I want to write an email about, and then it goes and writes that email, but then and then I've got to copy and paste it and put it all in and make it all nice and neat and things like that. The goal is to take the prompt and then have the next prompt go and make it nice and neat and give it the additional context of what you're going to need after. And then, and you can have, prompts that have sub prompts so that you can run a bunch of different little pieces to it and then add different parts to it that allow for, additional data, changing.
Sure.
And
Could you show us like the node options? When you say add node, the
yeah,
prompt is an example, but there's also some other pieces that are available to us, right?
yeah. And again, if we want to, if we want to do everything through or do as much as we can through prompts, right? Because ultimately we want to leverage AI through its interface, and that right now that's prompts. But we can still make call outs to an API that is, data for.
Like if you had a database or a CRM that allowed for an API connection, you could um, call out for that kind of data in a more standardized way, and then have the LLM do something with that data.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Um, and
yeah,
then
and so
and the other option there, just to show, or just to say, I think, is the MCP server, which is a new way to is essentially agentizes the workflow, right? In that um, you could connect to a database via a typical API, but you could also connect to a database via MCP server that's going to take some of the prompting and knows what to do with your prompting. And so, you can imagine a workflow that's prompt driven, but also has these connections to external systems. And all of a sudden, you've built the thing that sort of you've built a workflow that that can run in an automated way. You've just given yourself. We've just built an intelligent automation in an agentic workflow.
right, and so there's two types of kind of agentic workflows that it allows for, in that you can make specific calls to, you can have to having a node get, making a call to a specific MCP server, using the model context protocol. But you can also create, if you've created MCP servers or you want to leverage existing MCP servers, you can access them through this MCP server during the whole run. So if you just want to make the call inside the prompt and you've added an MCP server to your MCP server list, you can, in your prompt, just make a call to add this data to the database. Add this information to the database, and you don't have to do the API call. You don't have to do all the other things. The agentic workflow behind it will drop that, or will use the call outs to the MCP server to do to further that information and further that workflow.
That's fascinating. I don't even think I thought about that piece. I mean, I think one thing we had on the testing side, we're seeing that there's an execution visualizer that, again, you're able to select whatever LLM you want to sort of run against for testing purposes. There's also a logging feature that's going to maintain logs throughout the chain. And so, if you were doing an evaluation, you'd want to see at at what step it like the what at different steps what the output is, and being able to sort of make sure that this chain is working with the level of accuracy and correctness that you want it to. And so um, you can see that the notion of a sandbox and testing has really grown into, well, first you've got to build, and then you've got to test, and we put it all in the same spot, right? And by making it LLM independent, where then you're able to maintain this knowledge independent of any particular model, um, or any particular LLM vendor, right? And so if you want to run this open source internally or part of it internally, maybe you've got PII that you want to run on an internal system, you can do that. And then maybe you want to do some analysis of de-identified data on a more public LLM. For all the upgrades that happen too, um, there's an opportunity to test it. Like John just showed, we've already got 5.0 into the system. If you've built something for 4.0, sorry, ChatGPT 5, if you build something for 4.0, you probably want to test it on ChatGPT 5 before moving it, right? And so this is going to give you an opportunity outside of a production environment to do that testing and then deploy.
And you'll notice like this took considerably longer because it was run against this model versus this being run against the OpenAI model. And so the kind of the benefits there are like Stephen said, in that if I go and change and I apply these different models, I can have the whole thing run um, you know as as a as a self-contained type of system, but it takes far more time.
Yeah.
So they don't run as fast. But again, if you're worried about cost, you're worried about the number of tokens, and you're worried about the actually creating the information that's relevant, and what I would say is that gives you the opportunity to say this is going to take a lot longer in some of my tests, but ultimately it's going to be more valuable when I do run it against O5, so when O5 comes back. So and here's an example, here's a better example of the way that it did it. That here it was taking the information from the one, but here's the a type of an example of outreach emails that it wrote, that are specifically around the 8 different categories that we identified originally. But so what it does is it gives you the ability to actually do far more work with less effort.
That's an excellent point, John. Thanks for showing that. And thanks for showing the different models in the same prompt chain. That becomes potentially really important. Using the right model for the right task becomes potentially an important thing to consider. Perhaps you have some local small language model, or perhaps again, like wanting to access a client database or donor database, sort of behind your firewall, or within your network, that it's enabling those types of things to happen. And as John's saying, like in terms of productivity, the ability to chain this stuff together and then have it run, right, is a productivity multiplier, right? Many of us today are using LLMs to generate content, um, but it's sort of not doing it in a workflow, because you could then take these emails that John's created, and with an MCP server connection, sort of say, okay, now send these emails, right? And sort of have the entire workflow run for you. And so anyway, we're getting close to time. You got a sense today, I think, of our MVP here, and again, you're seeing the standard version on Monday. If you're going to hear a little bit more about the government AI learning and innovation hub version of this, and we're getting folks onto that this month to try and solve some of their gnarly use cases, if you will, um, in real time. So like we're getting real stuff. If you want to try some of this out, let us know. Reach out to us. Put something in the chat. We are looking for some early beta testers, and we're really keen um, on some of the potential here. So with that, we've reached our 45-minute mark. John, thanks so much for being here and for all the work you've done on this. It's been great to partner with you. I think you're seeing like like there's lots of good ideas, but really in this AI world, it comes down to like being able to build and execute. And this platform is going to give you that capability. You got an idea, you're able to build something, collaborate with others, uh, do so in a way that allows you to maintain your intellectual property or your knowledge, and then share that with others as you see fit. And so we're really excited about that. We'll be back in a few weeks to get into more social impact and AI. We'll hopefully see some of you online or in person on Monday. And yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for joining us. And thanks, John.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.